To our pal Sean Hannity in New York.
I think you made up for all of last year.
Use the time wisely, Sean.
We're gonna give you the radio show. You can host my show one day, and it's going to be Hitting the Post. We'll tell you all about it.
No way, man.
All right, Tucker, great show as always. Thank you. Welcome to Hannity. A busy news night. We start with a Fox News alert. A suspected terrorist has just been arrested after the FBI uncovered a plot to attack the White House and several other buildings in Washington, D.C. We'll keep you updated throughout the hour as we learn more details about this scary, foiled act of terror. We also have a lot of ground to cover, including a preview of the radical field of Democrats that want to be your next president. We'll also show you the unwelcoming reception that Angel Moms got when they went to Speaker Pelosi's office and Chuck Schumer's office. And also Fox News contributor Lawrence Jones, he hit the ground. We sent him out to Nancy Pelosi's district. What we found will shock you. Like, here's a quick preview.
How has she been for your community?
Things need to change a little bit here. Definitely. The homelessness is the biggest problem. I mean, the drugs and all.
I definitely don't feel very good about her leadership, so I don't think she's being I think she's status quo.
Here's a tip. Be prepared to hear a lot about needles and feces. I know it sounds weird, but we'll explain it. We'll have more coming up later. But first, our top story tonight, a huge, massive bombshell development in our very important Hannity Watch on the deep state. Let me sum it up. They knew it all before they ever filed for FISA. Listen closely, because this is serious and something we never knew before. The Hill's John Solomon just broke this story about an hour ago, damning new information detailing that James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and others, top officials at the FBI and DOJ, they willfully committed FISA court fraud in the lead up to the 2016 election to assist Hillary. They did it knowingly. According to this report, in the summer of 2016, the fourth highest ranking member of the DOJ, Bruce Orr, he briefed members, under testimony, he told them, briefed members of the FBI and other Justice Department officials about the infamous Steele dossier. And he issued this warning. The so-called intelligence in the dossier was actually op research, bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, and could therefore be tainted with bias. Remember, Bruce Orr knew about this Clinton connection. His wife, Nellie Orr, worked with Christopher Steele on behalf of the Clinton campaign to put those Russian lies together. Now, putting that disgusting conflict of interest aside, just for a moment, here's where this report takes a very serious, malicious, and illegal turn. Because we now know that Bruce Orr and his warnings were totally ignored by the FBI. That people that signed on to the FISA applications, quote, admitted weeks later from the FISA warrant that the FBI obtained from a federal court on Trump campaign associate Carter Page, quote, because of the FBI's zeal to obtain a warrant before Election Day, that is fraud on a FISA court. That's fraud on you, the American people, our inalienable rights. We have a Constitution that is supposed to protect us from this. That is what happened under James Comey's leadership. That's why so many top officials surrounding Comey under his leadership have either been fired, demoted, forced to resign, and we know people like McCabe and Baker are now being looked at criminally. There's a criminal investigation because this was abuse of power and it was rampant, the bias unconscionable, the corruption widespread, and this is what failure of leadership looks like. All the sanctimony of James Comey, look at what happened on his watch. And believe it or not, here's where the story gets even worse. Among those briefed by Bruce Orr were Andy McCabe, the deputy FBI director under Comey, also a top lawyer for Loretta Lynch, also Andrew Weissman, that's right, Mueller's pit bull. He was also briefed on all of this, and he's currently the lead investigator in terms of the Trump campaign. He knew the dossier was Clinton op research. He knew it was bought and paid for, Russian lies. He knew it, and he used it anyway as the basis for an investigation, not into Hillary, but into Donald Trump. Now, this is all going on as we speak. This has to stop, and everyone who abused their power must now be held accountable. Now, John Solomon, Greg Jarrett, Sarah Carter, all on this big breaking development. We'll get to it in a minute. But first, we have something extremely concerning to report. Maxine Waters, now the chairwoman of the all-powerful Financial Services Committee. That's right. We long warned you this could happen. Our fears have come true. The same impeachment-obsessed congresswoman who has zero experience of working in finance and a degree in sociology, and who once vowed to take revenge on banks and financial institutions everywhere, will do to you what you did to us, was the quote. She's now the chairwoman of the Financial Services Committee. Now, joining her on that very influential committee, someone equally unqualified, admitted socialist, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. In an interview with the Washington Post, she told her critics to, quote, enjoy being exhausted for the next 2 years while we run train on the progressive agenda. Well, some are saying that it's slang words. I won't get into the graphic details of what some say that may mean. But, of course, this is not only ludicrous from a congresswoman, but since the early days of her campaign, the media obsessed over this woman has been sort of like a gold mine of the most ridiculous statements. This is going to be a very entertaining 2 years. Take a look.
Medicare for all would save the American people a very large amount of money. Why aren't we incorporating the cost of all the funeral expenses of those who die because they can't afford access to health care? But when it comes to tax cuts for billionaires and when it comes to unlimited war, we seem to be able to invent that money very easily. We look at these figures and we say, oh, unemployment is low, everything is fine, right? Well, unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. Capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist in the world. I would support impeachment. We need to occupy every airport. We need to occupy every border. We need to occupy every ICE office.
If we work our butts off to make sure that we take back all 3 chambers of Congress, all 3 chambers of government, the presidency, the Senate, and the House.
The Washington Post recently awarded you 4 Pinocchios.
Oh, my goodness.
For misstating some statistics about Pentagon spending.
You used the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements. Just last year, we gave the military a $700 billion budget increase, which they didn't even ask for. I think that there's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right.
That's socialist, the new rock star of the Democratic Party, the radical Democratic Party in Congress. And while many of her public comments are, in fact, bizarre and ill-informed, her political beliefs, well, they're actually even worse. She wants the government to control your money, your income, your property, in order to fund her grand visions of nationwide socialized health care, mandated green energy, and huge government payoffs for higher education. And by the way, we're all fossil fuels in 12 years. She's in an accurate representation now of what has become not a Democratic Party, a socialist radical party. And as the 2020 presidential election now approaches, more and more Democrats are throwing their hats in the ring, and it's now shaping up to be a very large and extreme field of candidates, including New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Take a look.
Do you have anything you would like to announce?
Yes.
And what would that be, madam?
I'm filing an exploratory committee for President of the United States tonight.
Tonight. There you go. Okay, well, thank you for telling everybody here. Thank you very much. I'm honored that you're here.
All right, don't be fooled by Colbert's blissful excitement. Gillibrand's horrific track record and association should scare every American. You might remember she led the charge against the constitutional right to due process during the Kavanaugh confirmation circus. You know, the rush to judgment, no presumption of innocence. And she all but called the Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh a serial rapist and tried to wreck his confirmation. And during her efforts to ruin Justice Kavanaugh's life, well, she even appeared on stage with a known anti-Semite and a bigot. You know her. We've talked about her, Linda Sarsour. Take a look.
I want to introduce to you a another champion, another one of our people who works for us on the inside, someone who understands that she works for the people of this country, who's been speaking up against sexual assault and sexual violence before there was a Brett Kavanaugh. Please give it up to the senator from the greatest state in the United States of America, my state, New York, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
So I guess Gillibrand's tough stance on human rights makes an exception for the radical, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic teachings of Louis Farrakhan, who Linda Sarsour praised, or the anti-Israeli positions that Sarsour constantly is ranting about. So we asked the question tonight, America, do you really want that person to be the president of the United States? Unfortunately, Gillibrand is not the only radical New Yorker dreaming about being the president. That's right, Comrade Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City. He's throwing his hat in the ring. Take a look.
Are you running in 2020?
I'm mayor of New York City. That's what I'm focused on.
That's not an answer.
Let's not forget about Comrade de Blasio's grand plan to redistribute wealth and property, literally pledging to redistribute wealth, saying that all of the money, there's plenty of money, but it's just in the wrong hands. Are these ill-gotten gains? Did people take it, steal it? Well, he wants the government to control wealth, and he wants to redistribute the wealth so he stays in power. Not to be outdone, another potential Democratic candidate, Bozo O'Rourke, is getting even more extreme. He had a recent interview with the Washington Post and suggested that our Constitution is no longer relevant. So looks like Bozo is pretty far left, too. But does he really believe that constitutional principles like freedom of speech, religion, the press, assembly, the right to keep and to bear arms, does he really believe that's outdated? What would he replace it with? The Democratic Party is now getting downright scary. In addition to his comments about the Constitution, well, he also trashed the president's plans to secure our border, saying, quote, the border wall will ensure death. It actually will save lives. Now, he didn't elaborate on how a border wall is going to start killing people, but you know what? That's more entertainment in the days to come, just a preview of coming attractions. Now, this is just one more Democrat playing politics with our nation's security. The president, he's not backing down, tweeting again today. There are now 77 major or significant walls built around the world, with 45 countries planning or building walls. Over 800 miles of walls have been built in Europe since only 2015. They have all been recognized as close to 100% successful. Stop the crime at our southern border. Walls work all over the world. Look at this map. From border barriers in Israel, Europe, many other places, walls are effective, including right here at home in places like Yuma, Arizona, where crime and illegal crossings plummeted over 97% once the barriers were built. But we've got to finish the job because the cost of a porous southern border, they're too great. Ask the Angel families who recently visited the offices of both Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to let them know this is not the manufactured crisis that they're telling the American people. Take a look at how they were treated. Remember, they lost their sons and daughters at the hands of illegal immigrants.
The politicians who are here in D.C. are not doing the job, and so it's time that we, the people, speak up, stand up, and visit the people who are not doing our bidding and get the wall done.
What's not just disappointing, but a slap in the face and really hurtful is that we don't even get the respect we deserve. I came here legally, I did it the right way, and my son paid the highest price.
It's my brother Pierce. He was only 22. He was killed in a head-on crash in Knoxville, Tennessee on December 29th. An illegal immigrant that has been in our country for 14 years.
I thought Pelosi and Schumer cared about family separation. That's permanent family separation. And they both refused to meet with any of these angel families. So they'd rather put their, heads in the sand, lie to the American people, say it is a manufactured crisis. 90% of the heroin that comes into this country comes through our southern border. Human trafficking, we know the death, the destruction of lives and souls and human beings. Derail, distract, disrupt this president from securing our border, refusing to negotiate? Remember, this is the same thing they supported themselves 5 years ago. This is about America's sovereignty. It's about the rule of law. It's about America having borders. It's about keeping people safe on both sides of the border, because that wall can have a big door. It will allow us to vet people that want to come into our country, make sure they can take care of themselves when they get here. We'll have a lot more on this later in the program as well. But joining us first is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Russia Hoax, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, along with The Hill's John Solomon and his breaking news today, and also Sarah Carter as well, who has breaking news. John, let's start with Bruce Orr told everybody in the FBI that mattered in August of 2016 about the Steele dossier. It was Hillary Clinton, bought and paid for, unverified, uncorroborated, and not to be trusted. Now, by October, they never verified it in any way, and even in January, Comey said it was salacious and unverified. So my question is, if they knew it and then they used it as the bulk of information to obtain the FISA warrant, McCabe said no dossier, no warrant, that means they knowingly, purposefully lied and committed a fraud on the court, and they knew it from day one. They knew it before they ever applied.
Listen, Sean, if the new Attorney General, Bill Barr, if the existing Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, if the Justice Department Inspector General, if Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham wants to investigate whether there was willful and knowing misleading of the FISA court, all they have to do is call Bruce Orr, because Bruce Orr makes it adamantly clear. He told the FBI, I had concerns about bias. This is connected to the Clinton campaign. Its reliability is suspect. You need to do your own homework before you use it. And yet they go ahead and rush it through the FISA process. We've been talking about this and we've been putting these pieces together, but this is probably the single most damning piece of evidence. It comes from the #4 Justice Department official, the person that first really walks it in a substantial way to the FBI, and he puts a word of caution on it, and those words of caution are blown past as we submit a FISA with information that was not yet corroborated.
And Sarah, you also have new information tonight.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely stunning, the revelations that Bruce Orr had in his testimony, Sean. One of the things that I think is stunning is that in the summer of 2016, I mean, he had briefed Andrew Weissman. I mean, this is really important. He had not only briefed Andrew Weissman, but Bruce Schwartz, who then headed the International Division of the Criminal Fraud Task Force, and as well as another lady by the name of Miss Ahmed. Now, we know that Weissman and Miss Ahmed are both, serving right now with Robert Mueller. They have they're senior officials on the special counsel investigation, and they were told by Bruce Orr that he was getting information from Christopher Steele. And apparently they were briefed on all of this information, and then they went on to serve on Mueller's team. And just as John has reported, and just as I've reported as well, they were very well aware in the FBI what was going on and that the Clinton campaign was funding this. And they were very well aware that there was bias with Fusion GPS, and that bias existed with Christopher Steele because Bruce Orr warned them. And then they go and they've been very quiet. Remember, the FBI has been very tentative about saying when they found out, because we know, based on sources that both John and I have, that in that FISA document, which the president should declassify, and all those other documents, all of this will be revealed, that they never warned the secret court, that they were well aware that this was politicized and that they had weaponized the intelligence community to go after him.
Let me now go to the legal side and turn to Greg Jarrett on this, because that would mean they were all warned. They all knew, but they did it anyway.
That's right.
They purposely committed a fraud on the court. Right. Now, would that mean everybody who signed that document, including James Comey, including Sally Yates, Rod Rosenstein, who else do we know signed it?
Well, Dana Buante signed it. So you've got 5 people who signed it. And James Baker, I've been able to confirm today his testimony. He prepared that document, he said, because he was the FISA expert. Here's the Department of Justice regulations they violated. Quote, only documented and verified information may be used in support of an application to the FISA court. They not only broke their own rules, they committed 6 different felony violations as well. I've been able to confirm today parts of the testimony of Bruce Orr. What jumps out at me is this exchange with Congress behind closed doors. Or on one of the occasions when I talked to the FBI, they said, oh, next time you talk with Christopher Steele, can you ask him, is he willing to meet with us? And I conveyed that back to Chris. Question, after he had been terminated, or correct, and it's worse, after James Comey was fired, a panicked FBI gets in touch with Orr yet again and says, you've got to get us back with Christopher Steele. Why? Because they were desperate to verify the dossier they had used and hadn't verified.
But here's a bigger problem, because with Andrew Weissman himself being briefed,
right,
being the lead guy, pit bull of Robert Mueller,
he's conflicted.
This now taints the whole investigation. If they were looking for Russia collusion, they knew where to go, to Hillary. But here's the point. That means if he knew the entire time, that Mueller knew the entire time, that that dossier was bought and paid for by Hillary using Russian lies to influence the 2016 election, that means the entire thing is topsy-turvy and twisted.
Absolutely. And in fact, Robert Mueller should have taken notice of all of this. He's aware of it all. And he should have said, I'm going to investigate the FBI now.
Is this go to jail stuff?
Oh, it absolutely should.
All the people that were warned, they did it anyway. When you lie to a court like this.
When you lie to a court, conceal evidence, it's a fraud on the court.
John, let me go back to you. The Weissman piece is very important as well, because if they were all warned way in advance and they still never vetted it, they still never corroborated it, because it was never something they could corroborate, but they weaponized that paid-for Russian dossier to go after the president, ironically, over a Russia issue when they had it in their hands.
Listen, we know from Bruce Orr's own notes that the main source that Christopher Steele was using was a former Russian intelligence service agent. We know at the time he was employed by Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson, who was also working for a Russian company, Prevazon, a Russian state-controlled company. Those two things should have been major red flags to the FBI, and the possibility exists that the Russians were using Glenn Simpson and Steele to put compromise or false information back into the system because they knew of their Democratic contacts. That's what's wrong with this whole process. Those things weren't looked at before they were submitted to the court.
And Sarah, if the new Attorney General does his job, James Comey and everybody, all of these people that knew are now... They should be getting a lawyer, and they should be basically prepared to be charged.
Yeah, this evidence is insurmountable evidence, Sean. And there's something else that was in that testimony, and people should be aware that Bruce Orr warned the FBI that this information was not vetted. So the FBI already knew that the information they were getting was salacious and unvetted, and they went ahead with it anyways. That's enough.
One last thing, because I do remember we had the evidence. We had the notes of Bruce Orr with Christopher Steele, and Christopher Steele desperately asking, did you get it to the special counsel? So Christopher Steele was feeding information to Robert Mueller, and we now know Weissman knew that this whole thing was questionable from the beginning, and they never touched it. Wow. Wow. A lot of people have a lot to worry about tonight. Thank you all. When we come back, Hannity Watch on the move towards socialism and how the left in this country is coming after your rights and your money. Sean Spicer, Tammy Bruce, they're up next. And then an investigation into Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi's leadership. We took our cameras right to her home district. You'll hear a lot about needles and feces. We'll explain straight ahead.